trăim noi din vremuri strămoșești, cuvânt de dor și luptă, de doine și povești. Dar dacă astăzi pacea e lege și scut, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut. Cuvinte le-am moștenit în grai, doar bănuiam ce-nseamnă, ce tâlcuri au sub strai. Dar dacă astăzi tâlcul de plin l-am priceput, e pentru că pe lume partidul s-a născut.
طوفان خیزد، اعلام طوفان هاست که از هر کران خیزد. آتش فشان قهر ملت های در بندد، حبل المتین توده های آرزومندد.
الله اکبر، خمینی رهبر. الله اکبر، خمینی رهبر.
دشمن بداند ما موج خروشانیم، زایده بحریم، فرزند طوفانیم. در سنگر اسلام خودگذشته از جانیم، بازو به بازو صف به صف ما آهنین چنگیم. سنگر به سنگر جان به کف آماده جنگیم. تخت شهنشاهان شد سرنگون از ما، تخت تبهکاران شد واژگون از ما. دامان آزادی شد لالگون از ما، ما حافظ آزادی و اسلام و قرآنیم. ما در پی آسایش و معراج انسانیم.
الله اکبر، خمینی رهبر. الله اکبر، خمینی رهبر.
ما در ره اسلام پیمان خون بستیم، زنجیر استعمار مردان بگسستیم. از دام اهریمن با یاد حق رستیم، ما نغمه الله اکبر بر زبان داریم. ما چون خمینی رهبری روشن روان داریم.
الله اکبر، خمینی رهبر. الله اکبر، خمینی رهبر. الله اکبر، خمینی.
Небо утреннего стяг, в жизни важен первый шаг. Слышишь, реют над страною ветры яростных атак. И вновь продолжается бой, и сердцу тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. Весть летит во все концы, вы поверьте нам, отцы. Будут новые победы, станут новые бойцы. Милости не жди, жизнь для правды не щади. Нам, ребята, в этой жизни только с правдой по пути.
И он продолжает собой, и сердце тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. Не стой, снегопад,
Hello, everybody, and welcome along. It is the evening of the 31st of December 2025, and it is the end of the year. The end of another year of grinding wars across the world, the highlights of some of which you saw in one of the previous videos there. That was highlights from Operation True Promise 2, of course, and we'll come to the consequences of the Iran-US war. It's because that's what it was in reality in just a moment. But as always, if you haven't done so already, be sure to like and share this stream, and be sure to subscribe to all the various different platforms that we're on. We are live on YouTube, Twitch, Rumble, Substack, and X, of course. And so we will get into the big story of the last couple of days and the potential meaning of it before we get into a kind of a review of the year thing. Maybe take some questions as well if we've got time. So first of all, I wish you all, wherever you are in the world, I'm aware we have a very international audience, a very happy new year, wherever you are celebrating and however you are celebrating, or perhaps you're commiserating. But there should be some element of celebration in amongst all of our commemorations for the year gone by, because, of course, this is the year which saw yet again the frailty and the failure of the imperialist bloc laid bare for all to see. Now, yes, it is true, of course, that the imperialists led by the despicable, the destructive, the parasitic, the monstrous United States ruling class and their assistant / partner in this repugnant enterprise, the British ruling class, reveal that they could still rain down an awful lot of destruction on defenseless people, of course, but they remain unable to face their major rivals, the countries they most seek to destroy, Russia, China, and Iran, but also, I would argue, Venezuela. They remain unable to take these countries on directly. They remain constrained by the legacies of their current and past failures and the fear of asking their own populations to fight. Now, and this is why I've engaged in so many bullshitting exercises, which we will get into in due course. The year that is passing away quicker than last night's curry down a U-bend is, of course, 2025, and it was a year in which we saw the war between Russia and the NATO bloc on the territory of the former Ukraine grind onwards with some ends in sight, hence the desperation and the apparent assassination attempt made against Putin. But also we saw the clash between the US and Iran using the medium of Israel, which told us an awful lot of things about the weakness of the US empire, the fact that after just over 2 weeks that war was brought to a close with an entirely symbolic strike on an Iranian nuclear facility by the US, and then Trump declaring victory and running away. Now, apparently new schemes against Iran are in the works, and as I said, we will get to that in due course. But we will begin with, of course, the apparent attempt by the NATO side, and let's call this for what it is, the NATO side, not Ukraine. Forget Zelensky. He might be the man with his face on the advertising, but Ukraine as an entity is run almost entirely by the US, by the British, with the French and the Germans in the mix as well. Ukraine as a sovereign and independent state never truly existed. It was a state which, from its earliest beginnings, in the immediate aftermath of the counter-revolution that destroyed the Soviet Union, a counter-revolution led by its own leaders, the very highest leaders of the CPSU itself. This counter-revolution gave birth to a supposedly independent Ukraine, but it was never independent. From the earliest stages, Ukraine as a nation state after 1991 was brought into the Western orbit, the pro-US position. A 30-plus year campaign, in fact, since at least 1989, was waged by the British and American intelligence services to bring Ukraine entirely under their influence. This is not my speculation. This was said prior to the NATO-sponsored coup in 2014, which destroyed the incompetent, useless, and very corrupt Yanukovych government and replaced it, of course, with a bunch of fascistic puppets. It has been the case that the US and the Brits in particular spent every single moment that they possibly could invest in Ukraine, bringing as many politicians and networks over to the pro-US side that they tried once to bring Ukraine over into full puppet status in 2004. It didn't quite work out. So they upped the level of violence and managed to succeed in 2014. Ukraine has never had any sovereignty. It is a country that is and has been entirely run by its masters since 2014, and very heavily influenced by them before that time. And so when we get to something like this apparent assassination attempt against Putin, to say that, oh, Ukraine did this, this is to fall into a propaganda trap. And it is to ignore the reality of the Western way of war. First, let us establish the facts as far as they are available right now. The allegation from the Russian side is that there was a mass drone attack into around Valdai, which is in the Novgorod region of the Russian Federation, and there was, depending upon which point account you believe, but the general number agreed upon is that about 91 drones were fired into this area, a large number of which were targeted directly at the Russian presidential residence. Now, accounts differ as to whether, of course, Putin himself was there or not. Some Russian accounts initially said that he was. Later on, Russian sources said that he wasn't there, but his daughter and her son were there. But either way, it is a direct attack by the NATO forces, because that's what Ukraine is in all but name, on the Russian presidency, and of course on an area and a location in the form of the residence of Valdai, where there is a command center for Russia's strategic nuclear forces. Not the first time they've done that. I remember the attack on the nuclear capable bombers at I believe it was the Engels Air Force Base. So they have done this before, and therefore it is reasonable to assume they would seek to do it again. Zelensky, incidentally, might have shot his mouth off a little bit in one of his green screen videos on Christmas Day when he announced that he profoundly wished to see Putin dead, which I 100% believe that is something Zelensky wishes. So the story that came out yesterday, and this was something that Dima on the military summary channel outlined, was that Putin was at the residence and was there whilst he was talking to Trump. And the US side, therefore, was able to ascertain that he was there, and that Trump told Putin to stay on the line and he would be back to him after Trump had finished his discussions with Zelensky. The discussions with Zelensky, by the way, are a farce. We'll get back to the reasons why in just a moment. But the story, as presented on the military summary channel yesterday, was that Putin stayed in the Valdai residence, and it was at this time when the American side knew he was there that this mass drone attack was carried out. The Russians made the allegation that it was a mass drone attack on the president's residence. They didn't confirm initially whether Putin himself was there or not. So the Americans, of course, professed shock. Trump professed shock. Oh my God, this is terrible. How could these awful Ukrainians have done this? Now, let's bear two things in mind. One, there is nothing that goes on inside the corridors of the Ukrainian intelligence services and inside the Ukrainian military hierarchy of which the Americans and the British and the French and the Germans are not aware. Two, if this plan was put in place, it wasn't just put in place that afternoon. They would have needed to get the resources, that is the drones. 91 is a considerable number of drones, even though Ukraine apparently still can produce drones at a reasonable rate of efficiency. But they still needed to have them available, have them lined up, have their flight plans programmed in, and be ready to launch them. And the region where the Valdai residence is located is quite some distance from Ukraine. So you would need to have some form of guidance system in place. You would need to map the route out. You would need to be able to ascertain what the targets were in advance. So this would have taken some planning, I would guess, to put into place and carry out. So it is my speculation, and this is just my speculation, that the Ukrainians have long planned to have another crack at Putin. Remember, just a few months ago, there was an attempt to down Putin's helicopter in one of the border regions when he was visiting the front line. That was something that it was clear that the Ukrainian side, meaning the NATO side, was behind. And there was the attempt a couple of years ago, which failed miserably, to strike at the Kremlin when they thought Putin was in it, with one drone, which didn't really do much damage. So the NATO side has been behind multiple attempts, some more serious than others, to assassinate Putin. And Putin himself said, remember back in the interview he did with Oliver Stone years ago now, that there's been numerous attempts on his life that have been foiled. Now, one might say that that's him bigging it up for the cameras, but I think there's been plenty of reason to believe that that is true, given that Putin has many internal enemies inside the Russian Federation. And remember, he's been in the presidency and the prime ministership for over a quarter of a century. And of course, many enemies in the West who would love to see him eliminated, believing rather foolishly as they do that it would automatically mean a win for them if he did. Now, I would also point out that the Americans have a history of using negotiations to lure people out into the open and eliminate them. They did this with Iran. They killed the negotiators that they were supposed to be discussing the Iranian nuclear program with. These negotiations, by the way, are always a farce. It's not really about just the Iranian nuclear program that the US wants to exert pressure on Iran over. It is about the existence of Iran as a state which is outside or relative outside of their control. And that's what they've had with Iran since 1979. So they used the ruse of negotiations to gain details about where important members of the Iranian political, military, and scientific hierarchy were located, and used that information to provide assistance to assassins and to agents on the ground in Iran that could then kill large numbers of the Iranian military, political, and scientific hierarchy. This is what the IAEA's mission to Iran was used to do, to spy on significant figures in the Iranian hierarchy and then send the information to American, Israeli, British, etc. intelligence agencies to be able to find them and kill them when the time came, which is what happened at the beginning of the Iran-US war in late summer, early autumn of this year. So the US also did the same thing in Qatar with the Hamas negotiators. So they have a history of doing this. And it's not restricted to Trump. Did Trump know that this was in the offing? Did Trump know that some in his own intelligence services were using his calls with Putin to track Putin's location and try and assassinate him? I would, excuse me. My guess would be that Trump didn't know exactly what was going to be done, but he certainly knew about the attacks on the Hamas negotiators. He certainly knew about what was going to be done with the attack on Iran. So I wouldn't rule it out that he knew. But for a country as powerful as Russia, it's probably more advantageous for those planning these things if Trump is able to be plausible in his denial that he knew. Either way, either Trump knew that this was going on and was using the negotiations as a ruse to try and gain information that could lead to the assassination of Putin, in which case he's a criminal, or he didn't know and Trump has no control over the intelligence and services of the United States, which we all know to be true anyway. No president has full control over them or has ever had any control over them, really, or very limited elements of control anyway. So this should be seen really as an attempt by at least, at the very least, elements in the United States to try and assassinate Putin using Ukraine as the means to do it. Now, I received a rather stupid response from some NAFO clown on Twitter when I said this. And he said, "Yeah, well, Bertie, if we wanted to kill Putin, he'd be dead already." That's a ludicrous stereotype. I don't know if this guy was from the American South. I'm just giving him that voice. Maybe he's more got a sort of nerdy American voice, like, "Hey, Bertie, if he wanted to kill Putin, he'd be dead already." You know. But the point is that this is the purpose of Ukraine. And I want to draw you back to comments made by Zelensky 2 years ago now, when he said that he wanted Ukraine to be a big Israel. Now, think about that. Does that mean corrupt? Does that mean a center of organized crime? Does that mean a center of the sex trafficking industry? Does that mean a center of the pornography industry? Probably, given what's happened to Ukraine over the last few years. But when he said that he wanted Ukraine to be a big Israel, what does that mean? Because I think that comment should tell us the truth about this assassination attempt, which is that we need to think about, well, what is Israel used for? And here's the link to the war on Iran. Israel is used to do the things that the US, for various different reasons, can't or won't do inside its own borders. So it's used to test a lot of repressive mechanisms. It's used to test a lot of weaponry. It's used to carry out a lot of experimentation that the US itself doesn't want to do it directly. It's also used as a garrison state in the Middle East. It's also used to do attacks on countries that the US, when the US stands off and goes, "Oh, well, nothing to do with us, those crazy Israelis. Maybe you'd like to enter into peace negotiations with us, and maybe we can stop them attacking you." This is the role of Israel. The role of Israel is to be the the advance guard of imperialism. And this was revealed in the war on Iran. The war on Iran was nominally between Israel and Iran, but it wasn't really. Israel was supported in that war by a huge amount, of course, of American military and economic aid. And then when it became clear that the Israelis weren't going to prevail, that the plan had failed, then the Americans cut it off and said, right, well, this is over. And this is how we should see Zelensky's comments about Ukraine being a big Israel. Zelensky, and whoever is writing this stuff for him, wants the same relationship, because Israel has been the US's primary agent in the Middle East. There are others, of course. There's the Saudis, there's the foul reactionary state of the United Arab Emirates, which is probably one of the most disgusting regimes that exists anywhere on the earth, and that's saying quite something. But yeah, the Ukrainian parasitic oligarchical elite wants to have the same relationship with the Americans that the Israelis do, which is to have them. They are the most important garrison state, an agent of the United States, and you have agents of U.S. imperialism. For the Israelis, they're the most important element of U.S. imperialism in West Asia. For the Ukrainians, they want to be the most important project for U.S. imperialism in Europe, or at least in Eastern Europe. And that's what the Ukrainians offer the US. The Ukrainians offer for the US the chance to strike Russia directly, repeatedly, over and over again, via missile and bombing attacks, via drone attacks, via assassinations, terrorism campaigns, and for the US to do exactly what it does with Israel, which is to stand off once removed and say, "Oof, wow, that was bad." This just as Trump did with this mass drone attack on Putin's residence. Whether Putin was there or not, it's clear that the reason why they did it was because they thought there was a good chance he was there. Now, the Russians are now saying that he wasn't. We don't know, but it's a fair bet that the Russian security services would have had to have suspected that this might be likely, given that they'd done this to Iran. Or maybe there was a degree of complacency on the Russians' behalf, which is that they made an assumption, and again, this is speculation on my part, maybe they still made the assumption that the US wouldn't dare try and eliminate Putin directly. Now, of course, my Cartman-voiced interlocutor on Twitter does have one correct point, which is that the Americans, of course, have far more powerful missile systems available to them than the Ukrainians. So if they wanted to launch such a strike, then they could presumably do so. But those who run American policy, of course, are very well aware that if they did such a strike, that would mean a direct war, and a war that they couldn't win. So what you do is given that the way in which the US fights its wars is at one step removed a lot of the time. They don't like getting directly involved. If they have to get directly involved, then the plan has been a failure. The plan was, with regard to this, clearly a decapitation strike. If some of those drones had got through, and if they'd managed to hit the right part of the residence, then there was a chance this could have come off. I think it was a slim chance. I think these mass drone strikes that they've tried on multiple Russian cities, the Russians have improved their air defense significantly and have improved their drone interception capabilities to the point where they can fairly capably deal with this kind of thing. And the kind of air defense that would have been around Putin's Valdai residence would be very comprehensive, given that it's not only a presidential residence, but also a nuclear command center. So there's only a small chance that this would come off. There is, however, there are small chance that it might have come off, and that would have been in the view of people in Washington and in London and in Paris and in Berlin, worth a punt, as they say in the betting trade. If you could possibly do this and you could blame it all on Ukraine, then why not do it? It's not as if they've not done it before. So is it possible that the Russian security services got complacent and thought, well, they won't possibly do that to us? Maybe. But I think that this should be a wake-up call to everybody in the Russian hierarchy, which is that there are those inside the US hierarchy, the British hierarchy, and the other major European powers, the French and the Germans, who would happily try and find a plausibly deniable means of killing the Russian president. Of course they would. In their view, it would solve an awful lot of their problems. If they could they think if they can kill Putin and take out the central organizing presence in the Bonapartist system that exists in Russia, then, well, why not do it? Why not take the opportunity? That will be the way that they would think about this. So I think that regardless of the denials of Trump, and whether Trump knew or not is almost irrelevant, really, this should be seen as a US-backed maneuver, to try and eliminate the Russian president himself. Because there is no way that the Ukrainians do this without having their backers on side, without having the nod from somebody in Washington, somebody in London, either one of those or both. And I think it was both. And so when the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs says negotiations will continue, well, negotiations about what exactly? You know, the US just made, or the US via its big Israel, just made a serious attempt to kill the Russian president. And what, you're going to continue negotiating about this? What are you negotiating about? What do you think you're getting here? Like, what farce is, what level of farce are we now operating on? Because there is a consistent failure by many on the multipolarist side, including elements within the Russian state itself, to truly understand what is going on here. The US runs Ukraine. There's not a single decision that's been made there in the last decade which various US government agencies have not been intimately involved in. Joe Biden he's on camera from his rather more lucid days back in the Obama era, boasting of the level of control that they had. Remember when he managed to block the investigation into Burisma, which his son was on the board of, which he was probably getting some kickbacks from? Well, that's just one expression of it. When the special military operation began, NED documents leaked out confirming that the US was designing every single aspect of Ukrainian policy. The US had embassy in Kiev prior to the SMO beginning, was one of the biggest they had anywhere in the world. There was over 800 staff at it at one stage. American advisors advisors were attached to every single Ukrainian government ministry. The New York Times admits openly that the CIA redesigned the Ukrainian intelligence services to run on lines that they would dictate. And what? And of course, the financial future, the economic future of Ukraine, if it has one, is decided entirely from Washington, London, and Berlin and Paris. So what? Are you saying that suddenly this is a government with acts with a lot of agency? Of course it doesn't. Now it's true that the Ukrainian oligarchy, can drive a certain hard bargain, just as the Israelis can more so, but they can drive a hard bargain with the Americans to get more money for themselves, to get more resources for themselves. But the idea that the Americans are just negotiating really hard with the Ukrainians to find a settlement that's acceptable to the Russians, this is a joke. What's actually going on is that the Americans, and again, forget what Trump says. Trump has no power over this whatsoever. What the American side is doing is trying to find a way of preserving their investment in Ukraine. That's what's going on. They have spent 30 years now gaining near total control over Ukraine. They are not prepared to let the Russians have it, as this is how the Americans would see it. Same with the British, same with the French, same with the Germans. But for the big two, Britain and the United States, this is particularly true. They are not prepared to see their gains negotiated away. They are not prepared to see the Kiev regime, which they have done so much to build up and to make sure is totally under their control, washed away, swept away by the war. What they're desperately trying to do is to force a settlement which maintains the Kiev regime in power. It doesn't matter whether it's Zelensky there, Zaluzny, or somebody else, but they are trying to preserve their investment. And that's what this negotiation process is really all about. It's not about satisfying Russian demand. It's trying to find the bare minimum that they can possibly get away with to get the war settled and then rebuild Ukraine again for another go in a few years' time. That's the plan. So the idea that, as some people say, that Trump is trying really hard to negotiate with Zelensky, but he just can't get Zelensky to make enough concessions. This is nonsense. This is nonsense. If the plan that they are working on is to try and find something that enables them to deliver some kind of settlement. Now, there are many different interests in some kind of settlement which preserves the Kiev regime. Now, of course, within the Western negotiating position, there's all kinds of factors and factions floating around, some of whom want a settlement now, some of whom don't. The reason why, of course, the French and the British keep saying that they'll deploy troops to monitor the settlement partially is to bolster Zelensky's position, but also it's to the Russians walk away from the negotiations. Because the more you bring Western forces on the ground and the more Zelensky talks about having guarantees from NATO, etc., the more unacceptable any settlement looks to the Russian side, which is a big part of the motivation here. They want the war to continue and they want to be able to blame the Russians for it. That's the reality of the Western position. So this was the latest expression of what is, in effect, long-standing now Anglo-American state policy, which is that they seek to kill foreign leaders who they can't subordinate. Now, that's been largely true for many decades. They've always acted that way. I mean, just look at the fate of Patrice Lumumba in what's now the DRC, all the way back in 1961. Just look at how many times they tried to kill Castro. They didn't usually try to kill the general secretary of the CPSU back in the day, though. No, at least as far as we know, they didn't usually try to assassinate the head of the general secretary of the CPC and president of the People's Republic of China. They don't usually do that because back in the Soviet Union's days and now with China, they have a level of fear about the consequences of doing that, which apparently they don't share with regard to the potential consequences of having the Ukrainians get lucky and manage to knock out Putin. But this is now their policy. They have become much more dangerous in certain respects than they were in the Cold War. In a lot of other respects, they're weaker, they're less capable of taking on their rivals. They're reliant upon trickery and subterfuge and terrorism because that's all they've got left that they're any good at. But it's absolutely the case that this should be seen as a serious attempt using Ukraine, the big Israel, to assassinate the president of the Russian Federation. I would not believe any denial that comes out of Keir Starmer's gob or Donald Trump's mouth. They are absolutely up to their necks in this. And it would seem that at least some inside the Russian Federation do understand this. Others do not. The more pro-bourgeois factions inside the Russian government don't understand it, don't want to understand it, are desperate to get back to business as usual with the West. Others do understand that there can be no return to the past. And let's hope that those forces prevail. So the other points I wanted to mention about the past year, which is that, and just drawing from the assassination attempt made against Putin, the mere fact that they have to resort to terrorism, they have to resort to Ukraine flinging drones at Putin's residence, should tell us that this is another year which has seen the limitations of imperialism very much exposed. They were exposed in the Iran war. Again, I played that video in the introduction for that reason, which is that it tells us a lot about the way in which the imperialist powers fight their wars now. That the way in which the Israelis went about the war on Iran, and what the way they did this was much more about shock tactics and destabilization than it was military damage. They did manage to do a fair bit of damage to Iranian air defense in the early stages of the 12-day war, but not enough. And the big push from the US side via Israel was that they would do a mass assassination campaign. They worked overtime to learn the whereabouts of senior IRGC military figures, senior scientists, some politicians, and then sought to eliminate the Iranian political, military, and scientific leadership, with the belief that if they did that all at the same time over the course of like 48 hours, to kill as many of the Iranian leadership as they possibly could, and then hope that would lead to destabilization, a potential coup, the removal of the system of the Islamic Republic. That was what their plan was. And they had reason to believe that it would be a success. There's plenty of traitors inside the Islamic Republic. There's plenty of bourgeois comprador types who'd love to return to the relationship they had with the US during the glory days of the Shah. This didn't happen, though. What happened was the Iranian population rallied behind the leadership of Ayatollah Khamenei, who the US did make a serious attempt to kill, but they didn't know where he was. His location is still subject to a very effective maximum secrecy by the Iranian side. Unfortunately for the Iranians, many of their other leaders proved to be rather lax in their security. There was a lot of stories that came out about Iranian senior military and political figures using open WhatsApp chat to communicate with each other. It's like, you can't really believe that this is true, but this is apparently what is true. And one would hope that the Iranian side has significantly tightened up its IT security as a result of this. Because if you're using apps from the United States to communicate internally, well, then the CIA, the NSA, the DIA, etc., the alphabet soup of American intelligence agencies can read all your messages and geolocate you and send a drone strike into your flat, as they did. And so the biggest success of the US war in Iran came in the first couple of days, when they looked like they'd eliminated a huge amount of the top leadership, and they did eliminate quite a few. And it looked like they might succeed in triggering some kind of internal coup. This did not happen. Again, there was a rallying around the flag moment in Iranian society, and the Iranians very capably responded to the Israelis. And it got to the point where after several days and a lot of very important strategic targets being hit inside Israel itself. Scientific research facilities, military bases, air bases, army bases, and quite a number of Israeli personnel killed. That was the point when Trump decided this was not going to work, and that's the point when they called it off. See, this is the way they fight their wars. The Israeli side can't fight Iran in a conventional sense unless they're prepared to march their army either through the deserts of Jordan, Syria, Iraq up to the Iranian border, or try some kind of amphibious landing or air assault, none of which would work. The Israelis don't have the manpower to pull that off, and they don't have the air power to pull it off either, not really. And so the most Israel could do was what they did back in the late summer of this year, which is assassination campaigns, most of which were actually based on human intelligence sources and direct assaults guided in by human assets Israel and the US had on the ground. And a lot of the intelligence gathering was done electronically, but a lot of the rest of it was done via old-fashioned human intelligence resources. And to get the amount of destruction and the level of success rates of the assassinations that they got, they burned apparently an awful lot of their sources and their agents inside Iran, and that'll take some time for them to replace those networks that they literally blew up when they went after the top Iranian leadership. Now, the subsequent inability of Israel to defend itself against wave after wave of Iranian missile strikes reveals a huge weakness. And it also reveals a weakness in the US way of war, which is they're trying to fight Iran with their Israeli proxy. The proxy can't manage it, though, not without suffering significant damage itself and being pushed further towards disaster, because the Israeli regime has not had a good year. People will say, oh, yes, they're still killing Palestinians, which they are, no doubt about that. But they have been humiliated and forced into a much worse position, objectively speaking, than they were 2 years ago. 2 years ago, Netanyahu expected fully, along with his masters in Washington, expected to be able to expel the Palestinian population very rapidly to Egypt, to Jordan. This was all blocked. They expected to walk into Gaza and via the superiority of firepower, be able to blow away the resistance fighters there. None of this worked. None of this happened. They killed an awful lot of people. Around at least 10% of the Gaza population has been killed by Israeli action. They caused a lot of destruction, but they were unable to defeat the Al-Qassam brigades, the PFLP, DFLP, the other Palestinian Islamic Jihad, etc. on the ground. Every time the Israelis met with significant resistance, they had whole squads of them blown apart. They had huge casualties inflicted on them. The Israeli army was revealed, again, even according to former Israeli officers, as being completely incompetent, very poorly led, very poorly motivated, and suffered a vast collapse in morale. Now you have an Israel which is spending ever more greater amounts on weaponry, which, by the way, comes in from the United States mostly, which is very reliant upon that connection with the United States to continue to fund itself, which has been revealed in front of the entire world for what it is, which is just a fascistic colonial society, which is one of the most deeply racist places on earth. And again, following along from that is the center of organized crime, prostitution, pornography, and drug racketeering. So it has been revealed as a very much weakened, compromised state, which cannot, in truth, expect to last too much longer. It's still there now. They think that by getting this Somaliland deal, they can facilitate mass expulsions of Palestinians to Somaliland. I wouldn't bank on that, to be completely honest. This is, again, Somaliland is a British neo-colonial project. And so the responsibility for any ridiculous and reactionary plan for ethnic cleansing of Gaza to dump them in Somaliland. This should be seen correctly as a plan which can be laid at London's door. But I don't think that plan will actually come to fruition, along with a lot of other crazy plans that the imperialists have had over the past year or so. So the True Promise 2 led to an Israeli tactical defeat. There is, of course, the ongoing story with regards to what the unfolding events in Iran, which I will comment now on briefly. Now, there have, of course, been a series of protests in Iran recently, mainly on class issues, the sheer unaffordability of life for huge numbers of the Iranian working class has actually led to again, mass protests, which are led by people who, quite interestingly, want nothing to do with the Iranian so-called opposition, with the attempt to restore Prince Pahlavi, the son of the last Shah, who want nothing to do with like the MEK terrorists, people who have been recorded making speeches in front of these demonstrations in Tehran and other places, stating, swearing by their loyalty to the Islamic Republic and to Ayatollah Khamenei and to the constitution of the Islamic Republic. Their problem isn't with the system as such, or with the Islamic Republic as an entity. It is with the capitalist class of Iran. Now, if you go back and watch the 2 interviews I've done on the channel with Comrade Bahman Azad, you will see what I mean, which is that the Iranian capitalist class are completely rotten, that they are the ones who desire a deal with the West at all costs. They are represented politically by people like Zarif, Jawad Zarif, the former foreign minister, who was somebody who is, again, should be seen as basically like an Iranian version of Gorbachev, which is what he is. And that layer wants to essentially surrender at all costs. So of course, they are more than willing to reduce the Iranian working class to penury. And so this is how these protests should correctly be seen. The great majority of Iranians don't want to see their country subjugated by the United States and Israel, and the British again, but they're not prepared to essentially have the piss taken out of them by a deeply unpatriotic Iranian bourgeoisie, who are more than happy to destabilize the country for the purposes of their own profits. So what you've actually got in Iran is a class war breaking out into the open between the wretched Iranian comprador bourgeoisie and the Iranian working class. The Iranian working class who, of course, remain committed to a strong, sovereign and independent Iran. And the Iranian bourgeoisie aren't committed to that whatsoever, which is why you get so much tension and so many conflicts and contradictions inside the Iranian system. But that'll be a story which is ongoing. It's interesting that the usual Mossad, MI6, CIA clowns online have been redubbing footage from the protests to make it look as if what the protesters are calling for is the return of the crown prince. Now, from everything that I've managed to glean from Iran, almost nobody there wants the return of the Pahlavi dynasty. Nobody, very few people actually want that. That would be a disaster for the people of Iran, and most of the people of Iran absolutely know it. Nor does it seem that His Majesty is particularly interested in going home. I mean, that guy's been living in California apparently for decades, and just spends his time, living off the crazy donors to his attempt to reclaim the throne. He has a rather easy life inside the United States. I don't think he particularly fancies going back and being the dancing the puppet for the United States. He rather likes his life in exile, but they are trying to do this anyway, of course. So the story in Iran might very much worth following. There are Iranian accounts on X which seem to be dealing with, I think one of them is called Iran in Context, which seem to be a much more reliable source of information on the protests. no doubt these will be presented in the West as being another call for Western freedom and democracy inside the Islamic tyranny of Iran. But what some of these Iranian protesters are pointing to is the fact that the Iranian revolution of 1979 had a very strong working class component to it, and had in its initial documents and in its initial period a radical socialistic element to it. I mean, the Khomeinism had, in its original format, under the influence of people like Ali Shariati, elements in it of like workers' control, strong elements of like economic planning, all of which have been undermined by the Iranian bourgeoisie, of course. So the working class of Iran could well, and I think it seems that they are, calling for a return to the pro-worker traditions of the Islamic Revolution, and are standing against the betrayal of those traditions by the Iranian bourgeois. Again, very interesting to watch this take shape, and we'll certainly be following it closely on the channel. Right. So, thinking ahead then to the future, into 2026, where is all of this going? Now, it is clear that the U.S. State machine, U.S. defense and intelligence agencies, and the policymakers that stand behind them, there are many divisions within them as to how they want to proceed. Some of them want to proceed in the traditional manner of trying to take on all of their enemies at once. Some of them are a little more realistic. Some of them seem to think that what they can do is end the hostilities with the Russians in order they can focus elsewhere. And that's the interesting question. Will they be able to do it? Because there's another faction inside the US ruling class who are desperate for the Russian war not to stop. Because once the war comes to a close, there is a very good chance that the Kiev regime, even if they manage to get a favorable deal, which I don't think they will, would disintegrate as soon as the war is over anyway, given the huge unpopularity of Zelensky and the system, and that sticking Zaluzny in there wouldn't really do much to improve that. So there are those inside the United States who know very well that should they reach the point where they have to end the war, if it's seen as an American defeat, that will be extremely damaging to them. And so there are some in the US who would just want to continue the war no matter what. There are others, though, who see the priority as being knocking over their old enemy in the form of Iran. So there is every chance that the war between the US and Iran will be renewed. Perhaps they will try new tactics. Perhaps they will try to, again, take out the hierarchy of the Iranian system. Maybe they're going to try again to assassinate Ayatollah Khamenei. But I would anticipate that he knows that very well, and will probably have several successors lined up to take his place who are of similar thoughts and a similar school of thought to his own. Now, there is every chance that they will try and do that. There is every chance also that they will, having failed so far in their Venezuela campaign, resort to more terrorism and sabotage there. But what they will be unable to do, regardless of whether it is Russia, Iran, Venezuela, or China, is launch a direct war in any of these places in 2026. They will simply not be able to do it. They couldn't manage to do this with regard to Iran, as we covered at the time. Iran, militarily, industrially, is just too big, too powerful for the US to do a direct invasion, certainly too big and powerful for the Israelis to do much about. And so the war in Iran will continue to be a hybrid war. Assassinations, terrorist campaigns, economic sanctions, political subversion, and attempts to amplify internal contradictions in Iran so that they explode into actual antagonisms. That will probably be the method that the US imperialists will use for all of the rabid statements of some of their more unstable members of Congress, and there's plenty of those to choose from. The attempt to contain China will continue, and no matter what Trump says about President Xi, have a great relationship with that guy. We played backgammon together. I didn't really understand what was happening, but I think I won. There will be more attempts to try and contain what the US sees as the very threatening rise of China, we can expect similar things to carry on, which are sabotage of the Belt and Road Initiative, terrorist acts against like high-profile Belt and Road Initiative targets, such as those in Pakistan, attempts by the US to gain more and more naval control over shipping routes. This is partly what the melodrama over Greenland is about. And no, I don't think the US is going to end up running Greenland. They don't. Why would they want to do that? They can get every single thing they want out of Greenland without actually having to take any responsibility for it. Now, would the US's preference be that Greenland become an independent state so it can easily be turned into a puppet regime? Maybe, but there's no reason to believe that if the US pushes for it, they can't get everything they want out of the current Danish rulers of Greenland. So the part of it is about getting control of the sea lanes in the towards the North Pole. Part of it is about getting their hands potentially on the rare earth metals that are buried under Greenland soil. And partly it is about, of course, clamping down and making sure that they have total control over what they regard as their hemisphere, the Western Hemisphere. That's what the drama in Venezuela is about. Now, I should mention with regard to Venezuela at this point that so far the Maduro-led government has done quite a lot of the right things in order to respond to this aggression. They have not capitulated. They have pushed the revolutionary process further by arming the working class. They have consistently rallied the working class in the streets of Caracas and elsewhere. And this is, of course, the biggest and best defense against any US subversion, which is an active, highly politicized, armed population that are ready to fight to preserve their revolution, the ongoing Bolivarian revolution. That's the best defense, because if you have that, then you can make sure that the various structures of the state remain under control, that the internal traitors are intimidated out of potentially taking any kind of action. That, again, thanks to both Chavez and Maduro, they have very solid control over the Venezuelan military. Trump fully expected, due to, people that are very smart and know about these things, they fully expected that if they sat off the coast of Venezuela, blowing up speedboats and killing Colombian fishermen and making a lot of dire threats and moving a lot of ships around, that the Venezuelans would back down and would capitulate. So far, they haven't. So that leaves Trump with a rather difficult decision to make, which is, well, where is he going to go now with it? So far, we don't have a coherent answer on that point. This, as I said the other day, might be part of the reason why they're shifting their attention to bombing Nigeria. They can get the wretched drug dealer that runs Nigeria, Bola Tinubu, to agree to just about anything. So if the US needs to prove how strong and virile it is by bombing some empty spaces inside northern Nigeria, then I'm sure that President Tinubu wouldn't place any barriers in their way of doing so. And of course, this is also about positioning the US in order so it can strike at the Association of Sahel States, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, of course, who may well be targeted as we go into the new year, given that the imperialists understand how crucial control of the Sahel is for their plans. So we can expect more trouble to come there as well. In the new year, it's also vital to understand that the crisis in the Western economies will continue. The crisis inside the United States will intensify. It's both an economic and a political crisis. But this again reveals to us the way, the path to the future. The path to the future everywhere, but especially in the imperialist countries, is only available to us once the working class re-enters a mass struggle as a class. You see, what we've seen over the last decade is just how useless the petty bourgeoisie and labor aristocracy are. All their attempts at struggle have ended in contemptible and disgraceful failures. And so what is needed in the United States, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, etc., is for the working class to emerge as a class for itself again, and to openly embark upon mass struggle. That is the only way in which things are going to move forward. All this other stuff that we've been engaged in for the past decade and 15 years now has proven to be just an awful lot of failure. Various different social democratic revival projects, Syriza in Greece, Podemos in Spain, Corbyn in this country, the Greens in this country, all total disasters, all total failures. It's only when the working class itself becomes active as its true role as the revolutionary agent of change that we will see any real forward progress. And that is something, of course, to look out for in the upcoming year. So, bringing things to a close for tonight, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run through some comments and do some greetings to all those of you in the chat. So let's just see how many we've got watching thus far. We have over 200 of you watching on Rumble and Twitch and on YouTube. Good to have you with us. And what have we got over there on X? Let's just have a look here. What have we got? We have, yes, 281 of you over there on X. Apparently we're beating One American News. So yeah, with 1/1000th of their budget. Now, just before we get to the comments here, I'll just add a shout out to everybody out there to go and ensure that you do yourselves a favor and read the very interesting book produced by Gabriel Rockhill, recent guest on the Decline and Fall show. Because what the response from the Verso Books crowd to his book, which accurately chronicles how a layer of Western academic leftists has been completely controlled by the by MI5, MI6, the CIA, and others for over 70 years, in fact 80 years. This more than proves the point that Gabriel Rockhill is making in the book about this left that we're told to follow around in Britain or in the United States or in France or in Germany. This is a left that has been curated and created for us by our class enemies, and that the fact that all of these people are screaming and crying about the fact that Rockhill has produced this book chronicling how they are exactly the miserable collection of traitors that we know they are, just goes to show how right he was to actually produce the thing in the first place. So, hello to Anthony Welch, who says, what's the communist view on the new narrative that the 2003 Iraq war was simply about taking a competitive off the oil market? It's partially true. I mean, it was said at the time, I remember it very well, that it was a war for oil. That's certainly a part of the motivations. There's always more than one motivation, though. So control over the oil, yes. Having a greater influence over the oil market, yes. But it's also strategic. It's also about placing US imperialist forces in key regions of the world that can enable them to get an advantage over the other big powers. So the reason why they wanted to control West Asia, and remember their plan was to establish puppet regimes in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Libya, etc., and ultimately Iran. Well, the reason why they wanted to do that was because then that would enable them to, first of all, yes, control oil supplies, but also be able to position forces in a way that could be useful for threatening the Russians and the Chinese. That's the bigger game. So there was also strategic considerations. Always be aware of monocausal explanations. Hello to Road to Hell, Callum Roche, In It for Fun, Nehat Mere. Will it be a peaceful year in Europe? Orban says that, but then again, Orban says a lot of things. Who knows? You may get to the point soon where, the Kiev regime staggers into a final collapse. Who knows? Maybe. The Russians still insist on negotiating with the United States. It'll be interesting to see if that produces anything. I don't think it will. But No, I mean, the war won't advance westwards because nobody's got any motivation to do that at the moment. Even the imperialists have every motivation to keep the war inside Ukraine. So no, I don't think the war is going to advance westward. Hello to George Vlad, who says Ukraine's main railway hubs for arms deliveries from Poland and Romania remain fully operational almost daily. Mostly American weapons flow in unchallenged. This raises an obvious contradiction. Russia has neither stopped nor seriously disrupted these routes. Such inaction is striking, raises real questions about Russia's desire to end the war. Well, it raises an interesting question, which is that what is the tactic being used there by the Russian side? Why not? I mean, they have taken out transport hubs in the east, but they haven't taken them out in the west. I mean, maybe it's more difficult than it seems. I don't know. But you think that after 3 years, almost 4 years now, that they would have found a way to do it. It tells me that there's a lot of conflict management going on the Russian side. There is to a degree on the American side as well. That's why, unlike what the yahoos out there think, the US side is constrained at what it can do. It can't, as I said, it can't come out openly and try and take out Putin, but it can get its Ukrainian gremlin to do it for it. So we'll see. Ultimately, though, the Russians will have to bring this to a conclusion at some point soon. And that will mean confronting what they need to do about the Kiev regime, because the US isn't just going to give up the Kiev regime. It's invested too much. There's too much money in there. There's too much potential in there from the US's point of view. So they'll have to try and find a way of destroying the Kiev regime, and the only way you can do that is by taking its capital city and destroying its political structures. And that's ultimately what they will have to do. They don't want to do that. They don't actually want to get to the point where they have to take over huge areas of Ukraine, but that's going to be the only way they're going to be able to win the war. Hello to Speedy Bozo. Hello to Sophia from Tennessee. Hello to Jerry. Hello to Bulging Battery. Hello to Zukov's Boot. Hello to Daniel from Somerset. Hello to Victor. Hello to Chris Rogers. And also to Jonas Levinson, to Sweet Cocoa Vibes, to Ben Horst, to Alan Smith in Georgia, United States of America. Irish Partisan, our comrade out there in Minsk. Hello to Isamu17, and to Winston Fahrenheit, and to Jenny, our moderator. Thank you for your service this year. And to your dialectical, also in the chat. Somebody says they want a rebuttal of MMT. Well, I'll add that to the very long list. Alan says, it blows my mind that these petty, ridiculous games are being played while hundreds of thousands of people are dying in a terrible conflict, and nobody in the West really seems to even really care. It's sick. That is entirely correct analysis there. The reason why you outsource the wars is so you can keep the internal population completely ignorant, and that has been unfortunately very successful thus far. Who else we got here? Hello to Abtin, and hello to TG Wilson and Alex Oliveira, and what else we got? Hello to President Jesus, who's saying, I'm seeing the term neo-Stalinist thrown around a lot with regard to Rockhill. Yeah, well, there's nothing neo about us. This is not the X-Files. Sorry, X-Files. This is not this is not Keanu Reeves. This is we are not in the Matrix. There's no need for the term neo. You can just call us Stalinists. We don't regard it as an insult. Thank you to Scarfazation 666, says, can't thank you enough for your work. Thanks and Happy New Year. Thank you very much. Greetings to Mr. Chopin out there in Kansas, in the Midwest. Is that Kansas the state or Kansas City, which of course aren't the same thing? Hello to Jonathan, who says, I'm new to Marxism, discovered your channel a few weeks ago, and it's been very informative. Thank you for the work. Well, if you're new to it, good news. We have our reading group is in the works, and we'll be making a comeback in the new year. Alan says, they say Gabriel Rockwell is a conspiracy theorist. I think they use that term so no one ever believes in real conspiracies. But it's not a conspiracy. Like, everything that he documents, he has proof of. People, you also say that similar things about Grover Thurr. Like, oh, Grover Thurr, he rants and raves, and he's a raving lunatic. It's like, have you ever read his books? The man's the very opposite of a ranter and a raver. Like, his books are exhaustively documented. Like, it's basically just him working through thousands upon thousands and thousands of references and finding that most of the things that are written about Stalin were a lie. And so it's a very, very sober, very, very academic works that he does. It's by no means ravings. People who say that obviously either haven't read it or just, or have read it and are lying about it. And they say that Gabriel Rockwell is a conspiracy theorist. Well, look, the extraordinary efforts that the US and British ruling classes put into subordinating the left and to creating a left that would be entirely controlled by them. This is all well documented. It's all well that they take the realm of ideas and control over the realm of ideas very seriously. And why wouldn't they? If they can define how we see ourselves, if they can define how we understand socialism, if they can define how we analyze their system by giving us a left and an ideological framework with that left that is completely pro-capitalist and pro-imperialist, then they've won without firing a shot, because the very opposition that you engender will find as its leaders people who are, even if they're not direct agents, or should we say assets of the ruling class, are using a framework created by the ruling class, which is what Gabriel Rockwell proves in this first volume of his book. And the furious response only just proves how right he was to create this analysis in the first place, because it just shows these people up for what they are. And anybody who dismisses conspiracies doesn't understand the world. The ruling class and their agents conspire constantly. I mean, their entire rule is a conspiracy, because how can it be anything else when you're trying to convince 90-odd% of the population that the rule of 1% of the population, or even less than that, and their lackeys is a good thing? How can that be anything other than requiring gigantic amounts of conspiracy? Of course, there's conspiracy action going on all the time. So the only people who deny it are probably the people who are in on it. We are at the 20:08 mark. I have to retire to do New Year's Eve cooking duty now, and as you can hear, there is a restless dog somewhere behind me, so that needs to be taken care of. It only remains for me to say thank you to the 450 plus of you who are watching right now. Good to get those numbers on New Year's Eve. I thank you first of all to everybody who has supported the show on Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and Substack. Your support makes all of this a reality and makes this a project a viable one. So I thank all of you for that. Thank you to everybody who watches the show, who shares content from the show, and who has been with, especially those who've been with me on this journey since the start of it, over how long ago? 5 years ago now. That this has slowly been being built up. You can expect a lot more interesting stuff as we go into the new year. You can expect the return of our reading group program. We're going to start off by finishing the Gramsci series. That's coming up very soon. You can expect more exclusive content on the Patreon side of things with our upcoming historical review of the Ethiopian socialist period, that being coming up very soon. I've had to reschedule that a couple of times, though. You can expect more historical investigations, and you can expect more decline and fall in the new year as well. So I thank you all for tuning in tonight. I thank you all for your support over the last year or so. And I wish you all a very happy new year. And I will see you again in 2026. Good night and solidarity.
Небо утреннего стяг, в жизни важен первый шаг. Слышишь, реют над страною ветры яростных атак. И вновь продолжает собой, и сердцу тревожно в груди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. И Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. Весть летит во все концы, вы поверьте нам, отцы, будут новые победы, станут новые бойцы.
Продолжает собой, и сердцу тревожно в груди. Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди. Ленин такой молодой, и юный октябрь впереди.
С неба милости не жди, жизнь для правды не щади. Нам, ребята, в этой жизни только с правдой по пути.
И нам